Is Deb Boulay, and I'm the chair of this policy committee, and I'm going to turn the meeting over to Mr. Ed Forget, Deputy Superintendent, and we'll go from there.
Thank you, Ms. Boulay. Ms. Devati, can you start now? Okay. Item number 1 is a policy 4533 safe mentoring. This was brought to our attention by Ms. Boulay. We reviewed with New York State School Boards Association, and they do not have a policy ready for us to review. But as soon as that policy comes available, we will present it to the policy committee.
Yep.
Debbie, ask any questions?
Are there any? I'll just throw out that what I did was on these beginning policies that are here, I went through a manual that I have received in recent training, and it listed policies that we are required to have. So these beginning ones we did not have when I did a review, and that's why we're going over these.
Thank you, Ms. Boulay. Our second item is a resolution to consider adopting 4750 promotion and retention. Doing research, we did have this policy already existing, which is policy number 5410.
And Mr. Forget, do we keep it as 5410 or do we make it be 4750?
This point will be 5410, and as we move through the cycle of review of policies with New York State School Boards, and you and I get trained by school boards on how to implement that 3-year review, then we'll start to reorder the numbers if that's okay.
Good.
Ms. Boulay, our third item is resolution to consider adopting policy number 4772 graduation. We have an existing policy. It is policy number 4770.
And I can tell you why it's 4770, because we combined graduation requirements and the ceremony into one
Together.
policy instead of having 2.
Okay.
So
We'll keep it 4770, correct?
Yes, please. That's good. Item number 4. Item number 4 was a request to research whether we needed policy 5300 in addition to our code of conduct. After research with Ms. May, our attorney, we only need the code of conduct. We do not need the policy.
and I can tell you that 5300 is the NISBA code of conduct. Actually, it was reviewed as part of the process of revising the code 2 years ago, but it doesn't have a number, and the district does have a code of conduct that is reviewed every year by the Project Safe Committee.
Thank you.
Item number 5 is a resolution to consider adopting 9260, which is a new NISBA sample policy called Conditional Appointment. This is for your review at this time.
I did read this afternoon when it came up. And just for me personally, it was Mr. Lamar, he's not here. We would have to approve this, correct?
We could do a first read if you want, or we can do first. It's up to whatever the committee decides.
Right.
I think this is for
We should probably take 2 reviews on this.
Thank you.
And just to let you know, in the old policy manual, we did have, we had, 3123 and 4123, supervision of conditional and appointed employees. Just to let you know.
So I hear,
We just didn't come back into this policy.
so what I hear is 9260 will go up for its first read on July 18th.
That's good for me.
Yep.
Okay, Maura?
Yes, I would. Thank you.
Number 6. Number 6 is pertaining to our policy 115, student bullying, prevention and intervention.
Mr. Ford, the 9320 is really 9610. That's the one that wasn't on the agenda.
Yes.
I just want to clarify that then we're keeping 9610, correct?
Just put that up to
This is
9610, yes.
So
So
that's kind of.
9320 was drug-free workforce. We have policy 9610 that addresses the same expectation, and will remain at 90. Thank you.
Thank you.
So policy 115, student bullying, prevention and intervention. There was a request to review the exhibit. If you open the exhibit, please, Ms. Novotny, you'll see at the bottom, we use the names of employees as opposed to titles. the request is to remove the names and put the titles. So Dignity Act coordinators, oh, I see what Ms. May was mentioning before. The Dignity Act coordinators should be a school administrator, not human resources. The Dignity Act, no, I'm sorry, we do have it right. The Dignity Act coordinators in our district, the way we have it set up, would be the human assistant superintendent for human resources and the executive director. At the building level, when there's an issue of bullying or intimidation, the assistant principals are the Dignity Act liaisons. You approve that at the reorg meeting with the names of the individuals that we just did on July 6th. So the only change we're making is remove Michael McLemore and Pedro Roman and replace that with assistant superintendent and executive director of human resources. Sorry about that.
That way you don't have to change it when the
Right.
people change.
Use myself.
Does that have to get sent to the board for approval of that change?
I don't think so, but I wanted to make sure that we had it recorded in a live meeting before we did that change.
Can I say something? We have a policy that says the superintendent or district clerk can make any non-substantive change to a policy and let the board know about it. So I would consider that a non-substantive change.
Thank you. Item number 7. Item number 7 refers to school district officer and employee code of conduct. If you open up,
I just received this earlier, with the
Okay.
revision. I
so
can
if you
open
go
both.
to the last page, there's a section that talks about number 2 consultants. Right there. So number 2 consultants, the request for consideration by Ms. Goulet, no currently seated board member may serve a consultant or employee for the district for at least, instead of 90 days, we are being asked to consider 1 year after vacating office. So if you're a seated board member and you leave the board, you would have to wait 1 year before you could go into a consultant agreement or work with the district. I'm sorry, yes, 1 year. 90 days to 1 year. This is the request of our there.
So now I ask for comments or questions
From the board.
from the board.
I think it's appropriate. I think, you know, a little window is a healthy thing to have in terms of separation from one position to another.
Okay.
When it says currently seated, is that at the effective date of the change of the policy or 1 year from the day it's changed? Like, how does that work?
That's a good question. I thought it was at the end.
If you read it as currently seated means any person who is seated now. So you will want to change that to say, instead of a currently seated board member, you might want to say a board member who has, let's see.
What is your
No,
intention?
yeah,
But just, it all depends on when the policy gets adopted. So it should be 1 year after vacating office. So
No
it
board
doesn't have to say no board member.
right, it doesn't
No,
have to say
no, it can say
currently
no
seated.
currently or previously seated.
Just no board member. May serve as consultant employee
Yeah,
for
you can
1
just
year.
take out currently, no currently seated. Take out the word currently seated.
Does that make sense to you?
But if that's what your intention is, yes.
It's just,
So remove the 2 words currently seated so that it will read, no board member may serve as a consultant or employee for the district for at least 1 year after vacating office.
Yeah.
Thank you. Can you get consensus, Ms. Goulet?
So I just ask, guide me through.
Board members.
And, so how do you vote? Yes,
With that
way
change,
it's changed, yes.
yes, and yes.
First read at the next meeting? Or first read and adopt?
First reading adoption is fine for me.
First read and adopt on number 7. Mona, you got that?
Yes.
Number 8. Resolution to consider adopting policy. 4526.1, internet safety. So the third paragraph is being requested to be removed. This says, subject to staff supervision, however, any such measures may be disabled or
Relax.
relaxed for adults conducting bona fide research or other lawful purposes in accordance with criteria established by the superintendent or his or her designee. This clause was put in there to allow our district staff, if they had to do some research on a laptop or a computer, it allowed us that opportunity to do that. By removing this, it doesn't allow us to remove that filter. And I honestly am not sure what we would do.
This clause is talking about the above two bullet points,
Yep, the filters that would prevent that.
but it also allows staff to view child pornography. That's the
For a
problem.
bona fide reason.
There is no bona fide
What
reason.
would be a bona
The
fide
only
reason?
person that can do that is a trained law enforcement official. Not even every police officer is able to do that. So we need to have some kind of a wording where it prevents any district employee from doing research under those two conditions.
Ms. May?
Well, that's the committee's choice. I mean, it could be some lesser standards, such as the harmful to minors as opposed to obscene or child pornography.
And why should we have a staff member be able to look on a laptop for child pornography? It just doesn't, if there's a intention of trying to find child pornography, that's when you call law enforcement in. There's gotta be a way to word this legally where we're not giving employees the ability
Yeah.
to do that and say, hey, I was given permission.
So what if I try to reword it so that it doesn't go as far as child pornography and obscenity, but it allows for relaxing, for legitimate purposes? I mean, there may be certain, because there are probably words that, quite a few words actually, that are blocked so that you can't do certain kinds of research. So in order to unblock them, you would have to have somebody in the IT department for that particular person to
Yeah,
unblock it.
I would think if we worked with the law enforcement officials on coming up with wording,
Mhm.
that would be really
Right.
helpful.
I'm just not comfortable for any employee to have the ability to go there. There's no reason we're a public school. And we want to protect our children, so whatever way.
Ms. Delayed, would you allow us time to work with what Mr. Stridiron said? We can work with some of the sheriff's departments who
Yeah.
really specialize in this to give us
You're okay with
guidance
that?
on how to reword this.
How do we word it? Yeah.
I'd like, yeah,
All right, we'll reword this and bring it back at the next policy committee meeting, if that's okay. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Next policy.
We have an added paragraph at the end.
Oh, sorry.
So we added this. Any district employee that has knowledge of any district employee or district representative authorizing the disabling of protection measures to enable the viewing of child pornography or anyone viewing child pornography since the original adoption of this policy must report it directly to the Board of Education.
That one specifically talks about child pornography.
Yes.
So that, to me, is acceptable.
How do you do it since the original adoption of this policy, though?
If someone comes forward and says,
I know that so-and-so.
yeah, that's basically just it.
How is that enforceable?
I don't know if there's a way to track that. But if someone wants to come forward,
If
or they
we,
have knowledge of it,
yeah, if we find out in whatever manner that someone is viewing that material and we find out subsequently that other people knew about it, then those other people should be held as accountable.
To this
That's the
policy?
intent, yes, to
Then
this policy.
it's going to apply, in the past when we really have no way to deal with it.
well, no matter what you're saying, the original policy didn't allow them to view child pornography.
Right, oh, yes, I know.
So
But it really, I don't know that you need that.
Can we review this as well?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
Let's review this as well and bring it back to the next meeting with the other changes that will be. No, I'm sorry, next policy. Okay, in this particular policy, there were specific circumstances that deals with notification of sex offenders. We had some conversations at a previous meeting, where this was considered. This allows, employees, to come in under supervision to, participate. It allows parents who are sex offenders of students that are attending the school, an opportunity to come into the school and participate in parent-teacher conferences and things like this. So if you pull down a little bit so that we can read the special circumstances. As mandatory condition of this sentence for sex offenders based on probation or
Conditional.
whose victim was under the age of 18 or who has been designated a level 3 sex offender, the court requires such sentenced sex offenders to refrain from knowingly entering into school grounds. However, entrance upon school premises may be provided to the sentenced sex offender under the following conditions, subject to the written authorization of his or her parole officer and the superintendent or designee, the limited purposes authorized by the person. A sex offender is a registered student, so we could possibly have students participate or employee of the district, and a sex offender is a parent guardian. District may impose conditions such as staff supervision during the time or a limitation upon the times of entrance where the individual may visit. The request from Ms. Boulay is to take the special circumstances out.
Why would you want a level 3 sex offender, which is the most dangerous sex offender registration? Why would you want them in our schools? I don't understand that.
There may be very limited circumstances. Let's say, there's a parent who is a sex offender and their child is graduating and you have very, very strict, supervision of the person. I'm just saying there are certain circumstances
Level
that,
3 sex offenders
Where-
are not allowed to be within
well,
500 feet of the school.
it would be it would be because the parole officer has asked for it. And I've seen where requests have been granted. And I've also seen where requests have been denied.
Here,
And not necessarily here. I've seen it, in certain school districts. So it's not that you must, it's not that you must agree. It just gives you the ability to in special circumstances.
I don't think that level 3 sex offenders should be allowed anywhere near our children. That's just my personal opinion. I don't think it's beneficial for the students.
So your request is to remove special.
That's my request. I mean, it's up to the committee.
Unless they have some right that I'm not aware of, then I would say removal is the way to go. I mean, if indeed the sex offender being the parent or guardian of a student, and I mean, they have a legal right to coming in for a certain, limited capacity, then it is what it is. But if not, if this is totally up to us, I would say remove the special circumstances.
Okay. How would you like that placed onto the agenda for the 18th?
When you read it and then it's accepted, what's the term?
That's my
One
question.
reading.
Reading, first reading or first read and adopt?
Yep, when the first reading and adopt. Can we do that?
That's good with me.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you. Next one, 5503 homework. So there is a request, if you go to the bottom, number 6, for the homework policy. It says homework may not contribute to more than 5% of the student's overall average. When we brought this policy forward to make the 5% the threshold, we took into consideration the various opportunities students have at home to complete their homework. We are a very diverse community. We have families that work multiple jobs and don't have the opportunity to engage with their child at home to do homework. And we wanted to be very cautious as to not overwhelm or to place undue stress on parents.
Neighborhood don't have.
Parents or students in the home. So we felt that a 5% standard of homework was kind of appropriate based on the community that we're in. And it's doable, and it's something that all students would have the opportunity to achieve. We have a request now to consider changing the 5% to 25%.
Up to. Not change it to 25%, change it up to.
Okay.
And so the reason that I want this to be in this policy and the next two is because what happened at a secondary level is that kids quickly understood that 5% means I don't need to do it for the 5%. The reason that homework is in a school system is because what it does is it informs the teacher where they have to reteach, teach again. It's an informative tool that a teacher can use to know if they need to reteach. If we're serious about wanting our students, excuse me, if you can't be quiet. So if we want to be serious about teaching reading, writing, and math, the three things that would require homework for students who are 14, 15, 16, 17, and are reading 5 grades below grade level, then that teacher needs to have the ability to know where those lessons need to be retaught. Now, most teachers that I know, if they choose to use up to that amount, would give credit if it's done, not if it's 100% correct. So that autonomy always belonged to the teachers.
Teachers.
No other district that I have researched has anything like this in it, limiting that amount. Mr. Stritter.
Is this policy cover kindergarten through 12th grade?
This policy covers homework in general. The next policies that you're going to review for grading would be K-5 and then 6-12. So you're going to see the next two policies that come up. This would be the similar change in the grading policies as well.
So it would be up to the teacher to say, they can say 0% if they wanted to.
Yeah, exactly. Like some classes, like probably home and careers, there wouldn't be a home. I mean, what would be the reason for that? But in a class like reading and math in particular, which are the two things that we really have to raise up, then that is where that information would come back to that teacher instead of waiting for a test for the kid to fail. And the homework should not be any more than like 5, 6 questions, if that. We're not talking about
What about
the old age, you know, when you would have to.
My kid is brown. She's behind his group.
No, but you have to respect.
We'll make her behind.
Hey, Carter, you got to respect the rule.
And I respect my black child. I go to the school district.
That's why we all here. We get our chance.
Well, y'all not saying nothing.
We can't.
Well, I am.
You'll be kicked out. Let-
No, they have to take all of it.
That's
They have to take all of it.
I got a black child that's in
hold
school
up.
that don't even get homework, so she gonna be fit for homework.
Hey, listen, that's the rule.
No, be quiet, Carl.
Yeah,
They're gonna have to kick all of us down and kick you out. So
We
be
need
quiet.
to-
Be quiet.
We need to hear it.
Mr. Lamar.
We need to hear it.
Ma'am, I really want to ask, what does the community need from us? If the educators feel that homework is important and there is a difficulty in getting that done in the community, what does the community need from us to make that happen, to make it easier? I really would like to hear the answer to that.
Make sure that the homes has access. See, you dealing with homes. And when COVID hit, that's what I brought to the superintendent at the time then. We had probably about 15, 20% of the home that had no internet. So how do you think the kids can do homework or to do anything? So the first thing we have to do is make sure accessible to internet for all these kids to be able to do the homework if it requires that. Availability of teachers or whoever, so that if because you got to think, now we got Ukraine kids coming here that don't, their parents only speak Russian, right? So how can they then teach homework to a child that they can't even understand themselves? So this is what we're talking about when the assistant superintendent got up the other night and was talking about all gold backs. This is the stuff that we need to start looking at. This is why everybody's here, because every homework do not, to me, now, homework does not give a teacher, my personal opinion, just like yo, to say, well, they know what they're doing or they don't know what they're doing. Because who knows who's doing the homework, right? Well, who knows who's doing the homework? I could have my smart sister to do all of my homework and walk in there and get 100 on every paper, but I didn't do
Well,
nothing.
Mr.
So
Harper,
we talking about teachers.
If I'm a reasonable teacher,
It ain't no such thing as a reasonable teacher.
Yes.
listen, we
Not when it
gave
comes to my
you
black and brown
respect.
kids.
We gave you the respect to talk.
Okay. We got
It is absolutely informs the teacher on her or his teaching. So if every kid on that homework, if I give 3 questions and half the class has number 3 wrong, then I know I better readdress that. I use that as one of my main tools on how I instruct. By making it 5%, I don't have that.
Teachers don't even teach the kids these days in class.
We can come back to the
Yeah.
conversation.
Yes.
So
Let's come back to it.
we remain at the table with the conversation.
Otherwise, they're gonna have to leave because we have to continue.
Point of order.
No, I'm not going nowhere.
Mr. Howard is sitting at the table as a board member and has the opportunity to speak. I just want to make it clear, the administrative team did review this policy, and we are confident that the 5% is the recommendation from the administrative team, that we remain with 5%. And that's from administration.
Hello, Mr. Howard.
Can I speak to this?
Go ahead.
So I think what people are upset about, when you say 25%, we're talking about from an equity standpoint. You have some homes where there's no adults in the household, where there's no older children in the household, and whatever that teacher may come from a teacher that says, okay, I want to do 25% or 20%. Is it fair to that child who doesn't have the access to resources or the ability to get that homework done to be penalized? Because you have situations where we have a large L population and we have a large group of kids from high needs areas where kids, I mean, I've been to some of these houses down in this area where there's a room and a room to sleep. They don't even have rooms to eat dinner on.
Mr. Howard.
Hold on, let me finish. The expectation is when you do homework, you want to have an environment where a kid can be, where it's conducive for a kid to study and learn. I'm telling you, in some of these high needs areas, marginalized populations, that doesn't exist in those homes. It does not exist.
But if the teacher is not marking that homework as 100, a 70, a 60, if it's being marked as being attempted and tried, then it gives the teacher the information they need and it does not penalize the
But
child.
when you say up to 25%, that doesn't include those parameters you just spoke to. It does not include those parameters. Unless you're going to delineate that is all inclusive in saying 25%, that's a different conversation. But when you say 25%, it's up to the teacher to determine what that 20% looks like. And then from an equity standpoint, it's not fair to all kids. And when we say all gold backs every day, that's not all. Thank you,
Well,
Madam Chair.
go ahead, Mr. Lamar.
I have a question for Mr. Howard, or actually, for both of you, but you spoke, Ms. Belay, about how 5% gives some students the ability to just go, I don't have to worry with it
Many.
because it's 5%, it's
Many.
not that big a deal.
Right.
I understand what you're saying though about certain houses that just don't have the support system in place to ensure that the kid's gonna get the work done. Do you think it might be a better tack to leave the 5% or 10, keep a lower number for the elementary school grades and a higher number for the high school? Because the high school kids, secondary school kids, they're acting independently for the most part. They're not necessarily.
Can I answer that for you?
Yeah.
Okay, so when you're talking about high school kids from high needs populations, a lot of our kids they're engaged in extracurricular activities. Some of them have jobs and work to help support their families. And that's just a different environment, Mr. Lamar, and in some of the dynamics that we're talking about here. And I don't think from an equity standpoint, it's fair to have that expectation for children that just don't have the resources or the environments or the ability to get that work done. I mean, the 5%, I'm okay with, I would say keep it at the 5% and allow our teachers to do what they do in the classrooms.
Thank you, Mr. Howard. Dr. Campbell?
So I just want to reiterate, what Mr. Ford had said, the administration was not, we did not collaborate on this policy. And we stand firm in believing that 5% should be the standard, because if we go greater than that, we are not responding to every student in our district. This 5% is a low threshold, but it gives all of our students the opportunity from an equity lens to ensure that they can meet the needs of our educational system. We cannot throw out a blanket statement and expect that all of our students have the same opportunities. They do not. So we do not support that.
So any other comments from the committee? Ms. Boulay, poll work to see what the direction is.
Mr. Stridiron?
I think it should be up to 25% and allow the teachers to be able to have the ability to say, okay, this student may not have the resources. I'm only going to include 5%. She doesn't have to say everyone in my class is 25%. She can choose up to 25% individually in each class. If she wanted to.
Mr. Lamar?
Can I say something?
They're already 55.
I think some kind of
The
something,
percentage y'all should be looking at, Newburgh is 80% black and Hispanic, and they're being taught by 10% of people that don't look by this. So maybe we start taking our kids out of that school district and bring them back to Newburgh and forget the town of Newburgh and New Windsor.
School at all.
But
No,
the teachers have consequence for their students, whether it's 5% or 25%, and the child does not get
So-
recess, but it doesn't count against them if they don't include that homework. My kids with autism, as much as I can be at home, they need
Right.
assistance in
So-
school, they're able to do that homework. When you have 4, I didn't even know what I was doing at home for it to be counted against them. Now he's gonna take 4 out in September, I hear,
So,
and now we have to reteach
So what
our
I
kids, so there
suggest-
should be 5%.
And I'm a
So-
single
wait, wait,
parent who
just one
grew up
second.
in a terrible education
So-
system when it comes to black and brown. Y'all judge
This
us
is-
automatically.
this is,
So I might get my
not working out.
I need to just talk to everyone for 1 second. So, the committees and the way the committee meetings work, the conversation is normally held within the table. And when the public is in the meetings, this is your opportunity to hear what a committee is discussing and deciding. You then have the opportunity to take what you hear and voice your opinion and concern at the board meeting during public comment. We encourage you to come listen and be a part of what you're hearing, and then think about how it affects you in our community and express yourself at the board meeting. And I really, for purposes of the way things operate, I would really appreciate if we could have the conversation and you guys really listen to it and think about how this will change your conversation when you come to the board meeting. So I don't want to be disrespectful. I love the fact that you guys are all here. You are our community. We need to hear your voice, but the place for that is at the board meeting. So here, our administrative team discusses with the board information and changes proposed to the district, and then the board makes the decision as to what we want to do. So if we could kind of fall in line with that, I would greatly appreciate it. And take your notes and make sure you're prepared and ready, and we'll welcome you at the board meetings when we have the official board meeting during public comment. All right, thank you very much for your consideration. So at this time, Ms. Boulay, could you pull the board? We heard from Mr. Stridiron. I did not hear from Mr. Lamar, and I did not hear from Ms. Boulay.
I also would like to see the teachers have a little bit more leeway than just the 5%. Whether or not they would have the ability to adjust by student, I don't know what other regulations that would come in conflict with, but I mean, I just think that's
So
tying their hands behind their back.
are you quantifying it? And if you are, what's your number?
I think as long as it's up to 25 is fine.
So you're in agreement with up to 25%, Ms. Boulay?
and I'm going to pass it through so that the full board has the opportunity to debate it and then listen to the community and then make the decision rather than just us three. So I would
That's the way
say
it
up to
works.
25%.
So your recommended changes from the members of the policy committee would be up to 25%.
Correct.
Is this a first read and adopt or a first read?
We'll talk about this.
There's no reason to change this until, what would you suggest?
I think this probably would take 2 reads.
So this would be first read on July 18th?
Yep, so we have 2 sessions from the public.
So am I to assume that 5501 and 5502 would follow suit
Correct.
with what you just
Because it's the
discussed
same
with
number,
homework?
yep.
Because those are grading?
Yep.
With regards to homework?
Yep.
Yeah.
It's the same policy.
One is 1 through 5, and then
Okay.
the other one's. So,
One is
Because
for
you're backing
grade
each other.
5.
Yeah.
It's the same policy.
Why are they redundant?
You're okay on that?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, why are they redundant?
Because one talks about the grading and the summative way that we frame out our grading practices. That's the grading. Homework is specifically tied to homework,
Okay,
only for homework.
gotcha.
Grading addresses summative and formative assessments and a variety of different ones.
So when we're moving on to the next, I just want everyone in the room to know that Mr. Howard is here. He is a board member, but he's not on the policy committee, so he's here just as a member of the community. All right, so he has the same rights that everyone else has, but he's also listening and will have an opportunity to address.
So the next policy up for conversation. 13 is policy 5201, secondary course credit. Let me remind you that this policy, we began conversation around this policy at the June board meeting, at the June policy committee meeting. This conversation included input from teachers, CSEA, and administrators. These are policies that the bargaining units decided they wanted to review with the central office administration and make recommendations. So this was the culminating recommendation of changes for these 3 policies. This evening, we have for review, number 13, I believe, is 5201 secondary course credit. So if you could open up that document and, yep. So item number 1 was just to add language of the quarterly common assessments. And I can tell you that was the recommendation from CSEA, NTA, and NASA. And the central administration is in agreement with number 1 and 1B, just below.
And this was previously voted on, correct?
This was previously discussed and tabled until this meeting.
Oh, okay.
This never went to the full board.
Gotcha.
If you're ready, I can take it to number 2. Again, was just language change. So for number 2, it added pre-approved college visits and the wording, and do not excuse students from taking the final assessment. So those students that went out on a college visit or had an excused absence, they would still have to take and be responsible for taking the assessment upon return to the school. That was the recommendation from NASA, NTA, and CSEA. And number 2 is in agreement with administration. With number 3, we believe that number 3 is fine. However, central office administration say you can't just put the onus on the student. The teacher, student, and parent must set a mutually agreed upon time to take the test. So you can't just say you've got to come in and take the test upon return. We believe there needs to be a conversation with the parent, with the student, and the teacher to say, let's agree that you'll take your test on next Tuesday or next Wednesday. We just think it's really important for purposes to ensure those students have an opportunity. What do you think about that? That's number 3. When I say number 3, when I'm saying these numbers, it's the circled numbers to the right. Can I go to number 4?
I just have, the college visits are usually what month are most of the college visits?
I think it ranges depending upon the grade level the student's in.
So it could be, so the final assessment's always at May.
But we have semester finals too.
Okay. Final assessment of each quarter or of each course. So shouldn't that say final assessment of each quarter?
Well, it wouldn't be quarter, it would be course.
So the
Right.
final assessment for
Of
that
the course,
particular
of course.
course.
Oh, so it's a half year
Because sometimes
course.
half your
Right,
semester
okay.
and some are full year.
That makes sense.
Okay. All right, let's move on to number 4. Number 4, there's a request that we add the language, these students will not be taking the quarterly common assessments. The administration does not agree with that. We feel very, very strongly that the quarterly common assessments give us the information we need to do reteaching or academic supports for the students who might be struggling in the course so that we prepare them to take the final assessment. Removing that quarterly opportunity to assess the learning of the student puts a lot of weight to wait to the end to see whether the kid learned it or not. We feel it's really important so that we have a gauge throughout the year to figure out whether the student needs additional assistance or not. Removing that would not be in our best interest, according to our administrative team.
So I believe that part of the teacher's job is being sure that they're on track and know where the student stands at any one particular level, far better than a quarterly common assessment which would take instructional time away from that classroom or reteaching time away. So I am a proponent to keeping it in. I don't know how you guys feel.
Keeping the quarterly assessment in?
That they will not be taking the quarterly common assessment.
I think the key word with quarterly common is that it's an assessment that's aligned with the course, so that it's not an assessment that teacher on this team created versus this team versus this team. It's one common assessment that all students take that's aligned with the standards that the student has to achieve by the end of the year.
But it's under the region's category, and
That's
the
correct.
region's curriculum is straight. It's this week this week this week this. So that's where the attention needs to be.
This is just an additional safeguard that we feel strongly should be in there. But I agree to disagree.
And I agree that you should be able to disagree.
I have a question on it. How much time does a quarterly common assessment, the teaching for that common quarterly assessment take?
I need you to repeat that.
How much time in the classroom does it take for the, no, not to teach
To
it?
teach it
For the
and
test.
administer it and then grade it.
It would be a marching period. They're quarterly assessments. It's a 10-week.
But are they teaching the kids how to take the test, the common test?
The tests are aligned with the Regents exam for this particular quarterly assessment. The students at this point at the secondary level, obviously at the elementary or the middle level, yes, you have to teach the students how the construct of the test is taken. How do you take a multiple choice? How do you take a constructed response? How do you take an essay? Is that what you're referring to?
I'm just trying to see how much time it takes for the teacher to go over with the kids. Okay, you're going to be taking a common assessment test in 4 weeks. I'm going to prepare you to help you take that test, and we'll deal with the region stuff separate. Is that how it does? No, all
It should be separate. It should always be aligned.
Is that aligned?
I'm going to ask Dr. Farrell to step to the table.
Quarterly assessments, particularly both on the elementary level, the common assessment, and the quarterly assessments on the secondary level, are a very brief, one-period assessment that highlights points that have been provided for instruction during the quarter.
About the region. We're talking secondary.
We're talking about regions courses. The teaching and the quarterly assessments are highlighting the similar material that has been presented that will be presented cumulatively on the region's examination for January.
But keep in
But
mind
there is
also,
no separate instruction. There is no separate test preparation for quarterly assessments. and it covers the material that has been presented.
But keep in mind, if it's 4 times a year, you have a number of kids who are Ls who are gonna get extra time. So they're missing that one period plus another period. You have special education kids who get time and a half or 2 times. It's not just 4 days out of the year. And then when they're getting their extra time, they're missing that instruction.
And number 4, the highlighted, underlined, is recommended by the administration at the building level.
Thanks so much for.
The underlying, these students will not be
Yeah.
taking the quarterly assessment. That's recommended by the
Teachers.
NTA, the NASA, and the CSEA. We do not agree with the recommendation is what I'm telling you.
Dr. Farrell,
Yes,
the reason we give, assessments would be to do what, to students?
to provide them with the opportunity to assess their work, to provide the staff to have an opportunity to work with the students so that we can reteach and explain to students so they become more familiar with what they're being asked to do and can be successful.
Which is what normal testing is in a classroom.
So.
I don't think
Ms.
we
Boulay,
need
what
the
would you like
extra.
us to do with this one?
So do we take consent? Do I need to take consensus on just this? So, all right, gentlemen, do you think that this says the students will not be taking the quarterly common assessments? Do you agree with that? Yes or no?
Yes.
Mr. Lamar? Again, they will not be taking the quarterly assessments.
I see how they respond.
And the intent is to make sure they have more time in class on the material. Is that the goal here?
No, what I heard, if I heard correctly, is that the intention is that if they take the quarterly common assessments, the teacher will be informed and can reteach. The teacher already knows that by their normal tests. They do. If it's aligned to the Regents examination, which it is, and the Regents are laid out, you have very little leeway on how you teach in what order. Then we're just giving them 4 extra tests in a year.
Okay, so Mr. Lamar, what is your thought?
This is fine. They're not taking the test. That's fine.
Okay, so that's an agreement with this disagreement.
I'm going to be in agreement with the not taking the common assessments.
Not taking it out or taking it out?
I misunderstood.
Because that's the way he looked.
I'm just confused. The underlining in the red always throws me off too, but no. I would be in agreement with having that underlined red line be part of the policy.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, as do I.
All right, so that will be reflected. Number 5, the Regents score will count as 10% of the student's final average. At the June meeting, I shared the intention of the New York State Education Department. I shared FAQs with you. The deconstruct and design of the Regents exam should not be used as a district final exam, and that comes directly out of New York State Education
Yeah, that's a
Department.
law.
I don't know if it's a law. I know it's a recommendation.
So,
And we do not agree with using a Regents score as a 10% of a student's final average. We do not agree with that. Your thoughts on that?
I agree with what you just said. So it should not count as 10% of the final average.
Mr. Stridiron?
So the language should go back.
Right.
Not be counted.
Right,
10% seems like a lot.
Yeah.
it is.
Is that up to 10% or just 10%?
10%.
Yeah.
And you
Kids might have
sometimes-
trouble taking tests.
Sometimes you actually get the Regents score at the last day of the year. So how would you be able to recover from that?
Yeah.
So I would say no.
Mr. Lamar?
Yeah, I'm in agreement with them.
Okay. Item number 6. For some secondary courses, the final assessment will be a cumulative activity.
Culminating.
Culminating activity. We are in agreement with that. There are a lot of different ways to measure students' learning.
I agree with that
Doesn't
wholeheartedly.
have to be a standardized test. Yeah, Mr. Stridiron?
Explain this one.
Could be a project.
Could be a project, could be a portfolio.
Oh, that's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's up to the teacher.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's fine.
Number 7, Central administration is in agreement with this. For those courses that do not have a final assessment, but they do have a quarterly common assessment, each quarterly common assessment will count as 2.5% for a total of 10% towards the student's final average.
I do not agree with that.
That's CSEA, NTA, NASA,
Mhm.
and Central
I hear you.
agreed. Okay.
So these are for non-Regents courses, because the other one is,
This is for all courses.
well, if you're taking a Regents course,
There will be a final assessment.
if you're taking a Regents course, the number 4 says you're not going to be taking the common.
Well, this says if there's no final assessment, so if there's no final exam, we feel that you have to use the quarterly assessment at 2.5%. That's taken in chunks, so 10 weeks, 2.5%. The next 10 weeks, instead of knowing it all for the final assessment and hitting them with a 10% final average. We're saying let it accrue throughout the year.
I'm fine with letting it accrue throughout the year.
Mr. Lamar?
I mean, I don't know if I'm just old, but I always felt that the final grade would be a little bit more weighted than the earlier grades. That's just sort of the way I've always viewed things. You know, you have a,
But if there's no final assessment.
what
there's no
would,
final exam.
what would not have a final exam?
There. Dr. Carroll?
And if so, why?
Regent courses do not have a classroom final examination. And some of our courses do have portfolios or other, activities which are given in lieu of a culminating activity. Our work to study students do not necessarily have final examinations.
In that case, yeah, that'd be fine.
Okay. Ms. Belay, are you okay?
No, I don't think it should be in there. So I think we're passing it through, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
I agree to disagree.
There you go. Number 8. Number 8, if all secondary courses, the lowest grade on a student's report card will be 55. The NTA, NASA, and CSEA are putting in for the first quarter only. If the actual average is below 55, it will be indicated by an annotation next to the 55. The teacher will record the actual grades for all assignments in the learning management system. We, as a central administrative team, do not agree with 55 only on the first marking period. I think if you look at what happens for dropouts, there are certain students who are going through and dealing with certain things throughout the year that we have no control over. Students are smart. They know how to calculate out their grade. And if after the winter break, they come back and they say, I already failed, they're not going to engage and connect with learning. And that's a struggle that I have. And that's a struggle that our team as administrators in this district have. We want students to be successful. It's hard enough to come back from a 55. But if you think about opening your report card or going home to your family and showing them a report card, and your family opens it up and says, you got a 5 in math, how does that student feel and how does that family feel? If it's a 55, you can still not be happy with the 55, but you still have a target that you can hit and be successful.
Right.
55 is still not good. 5, you can't come back from a 5, but a 55 you can. So all we're saying is we have to understand that we're here for the students. We're all about our kids. We want them to be successful. We're not giving them a pass. Some kids have to work just as hard to go from 55 to a 70 as a kid going from a 5 to a 70. It's all dependent upon the student. And we feel very firmly, please do not change this policy. Allow 55 every marking period. Each board member, please respond.
So I'll go first. I am vehemently against holding that 55 rule for the last 3 quarters for these reasons. This was added. This was not part of Newburgh's years ago. It was added. You can have a kid who shows up almost never, who's going to get that 55 over and over and over. And what we are teaching that child is that it's okay to not show up because we're going to spot you that 55. And those are the kids, some of those kids, I am adamant that we are going to teach these kids how to read and write so they are not 5 or 7 grade levels behind. They must be in school to be able to do that. The other thing about this 55 is that you need a 55 to be able to go to summer school. Theoretically, you know, a kid can do nothing all year, go to summer school, and then pass that course. And now they're in the next grade and they still don't read and they still can't write. And we're perpetually having this system in place. We are the only district that I could find anywhere in this county and the one above who spots a 55 every quarter. So I think that that first quarter gives the opportunity for the student and the teacher to, you know, build that rapport as best as they can. And then it's up to the student to work and show up. That's what school is.
Mr. Strider?
Every 5 weeks, isn't there like a check-in every 5 weeks?
Progress reports.
So after 5 weeks, you have a student that has a 10 average. What happens for that student with this system as a 55? What happens? Do you say, we're going to give them the interventions? Or are you going, what happens for that student after 5 weeks that has a 10?
I assume that they're receiving interventions if they're performing at that.
Do you
particular speed.
know if they definitely are? Or is it saying, don't worry, you get a 55, you can take care of it under credit?
I can't respond to your question. I would have to do some research on that. I would tell you that we have an academic intervention services plan that requires us to provide intervention support for students who are struggling with attendance, for students who are struggling with behavior, for students who are struggling in ELA and math. And we have an entry and an exit criteria for that. So those, I can tell you that that's based on the New York State assessments as they go through. But your question to me is, what about a student that is just struggling at the midpoint of that particular marking period? I would say that the parent is in contact, I would hope the parent is in contact with the family to say, your child is really struggling. That should be a requirement for a progress report, that conversation engaged. That's why we have school counselors that are reaching out, checking in with the student and assisting them as well.
But is there a program in place where the students are enrolled in some kind of program saying, okay, you have a 10 at the end of the first 5 weeks of the second pool?
Is there a special class that they would have to go to? Is that what
Is there something that you can say, this is what we have and this is how we address it?
That's done through the counseling between the guidance counselor and the teacher with the family to say, what is it that the student needs? Sometimes,
How many students do we have with a 55 on average?
I would have to do a data pull for you.
That's something that everybody should know.
Right. One time at a school that I taught secondary English and I taught secondary math. The school that I was in, we ran our own little program and we would have the kids come out of their study hall and we would reteach them every day. We call home, say, we're going to take your kid and they're going to come sit with me and they're going to do da 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 da. And that was a voluntary program that we did, but I see where you're going with
Can
it.
the board get some kind of report of after the first quarter? How many students received a 55 at the end of the second quarter? How many were repeating this 55 in the third quarter? How many came up? How many?
For last year?
Yeah, and then
Yeah.
what was their attendance?
Sure.
Because there's got to be a correlation between the attendance and the 55.
Is that
And-
something that the 3 board members?
It's vital information. That's so important to have because say we change this or keep it the way it is. That doesn't change anything. These kids they know the system. They know if they don't come to class, but they still get the 55 and come to the summer school, we want them to learn.
Yeah.
We want them to succeed. What we're doing now is not working. So other districts don't have this and they have much better success than what we do. We're trying to understand what's happening here and address it because we are not working right now.
Giving me a 10 ain't working either,
Mr.
because I leave. I'm dropping out.
Related question, what you're talking about with AIS. At what point do AIS services kick in? Is it at the first quarter grade?
It should be at the beginning of the school year based on in 3 through 8 at the beginning of the school year based on the previous year's state assessment.
But mid-year, AIS can get at any point?
They can. They enter and exit based on criteria that's established throughout the year.
Okay.
Ms. Boulay, do you want us to collect this data and bring this back?
I think we should pass this through to the board. And then would you have that to show, to explain to the full board?
By Tuesday night?
Well,
Yeah,
it's not gonna get, this is not one of those approved right now.
So we're
So
gonna,
we're gonna, we can still
can we
approve a
put in the
change.
rest and not that?
so you want to go with everything except for number 8?
Yeah, let's get more data on it.
On that.
Collect
To make sure
more
we
data
know what
on
we're
number
doing
8, but 1
conclusively.
through 7, we're
Yeah.
gonna go and start to get
Yeah.
addressed.
And we'll have that data before we get to September.
Oh, yeah.
We should have it.
We just can't get it to you by Tuesday.
That's okay.
All right, so 5201, we're gonna move forward with the changes the board just proposed. And number 8 and number 9 are actually the same. So we will collect the data and talk about this at the next policy meeting. The next policy for review, it is 6 o'clock. Do you want to continue, Ms. Boulay?
Yeah, this is the last one, correct?
There's 2 more. There's 5205, credit recovery, and then 5411, participation in extracurricular and interscholastic sports.
They're both important. Can we try? Sure. Let's try.
5205, credit recovery. Again, this was a policy reviewed by the bargaining units and the central office. So number 1 is a simple change. It's just add secondary students, meaning grades 7 through 12. We were in agreement. It's not grade 6. It's just 7 through 12.
Yep.
Mr. Stridiron?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Number 2, we were in agreement with, again, wording grade 7 through 12. You're okay with that?
Yep.
Yep.
Mr. Lamar?
Yes.
Okay. Number 3, request to take this out, have not taken the required course or have not acquired sufficient credits for graduation. So when we're talking about credit recovery, credit earning options may be offered to students in grades 7 through 12 who need to recover credits, who want to retake a course, or who have not taken a required course or have not acquired sufficient credits for graduation, example, due to a scheduling issue. So they weren't able to take the course because their seats were full in the courses that they needed. This would give them that opportunity. Number 3, we're not in agreement with taking that out. Central administration. Leave the current policy, leave that language in, we would like. We don't want to penalize students.
I'm sure the reason that this was asked to have it taken out is to avoid the students who have not taken the full course. A full course would be about 123 hours and 108, we have a 184-day calendar times 40 minutes a day is around 123 hours in a year versus cutting that down. That's probably why they did not want that taken out. How do you feel about this?
So you're saying if you haven't taken a health class and you want to take it during the summer, instead of taking it during the year, you can take it with credit recovery?
Yes, credit accrual.
I
It wouldn't be
think
recovered.
you should actually have to sit in the classroom rather than sit in front of a computer.
I'm on the same page, I believe, as Ms. Boulay, and that I think there needs to be a certain amount of classroom time. I think a summer school class for an entire, that covers an entire year's worth of work should probably be somewhere between 6 and 8 weeks for 4 or 5 hours a day, if not more. And I don't know if that's what's been going on, but I don't believe these credit recovery or credit accrual plans are that exhaustive. You can't. Well, there's no
Is the
other
recommendation to take that out.
Mine is.
That's what I just heard you say.
Yes.
Mr. Stritter, you said
Yes.
out and Deb. Okay. I'm sorry, Ms. Boulay.
Is there,
So you're not gonna
a-
kids a chance.
I'm sorry.
is there a consideration for any medically fragile, so
I think the piece that worries me is that you have a student that's preparing to graduate, is up and ready and geared to take that course, but there are no seats available, or that course was only open semester one and they had a scheduling conflict and couldn't get in.
Can we qualify that to say that?
I think it says it. Not acquired sufficient credits for graduation, example,
But-
scheduling,
Due to schedule.
But not example, in the event of scheduling.
in the event of scheduling.
So we'll capture those kids so they still have the opportunity.
Okay.
Just, for the record, I think my problem has more to do with the way credit recovery and credit accrual is structured than that actual line. I think if I had the belief that credit recovery and credit accrual was structured in a way that was, really appropriate for educating the child, I wouldn't have a problem with that line.
Well, I think that comes up later in the policy.
Right, so maybe we, or, I don't know, maybe we address.
All right,
I understand the scheduling issues, because you only have a certain number of seats.
Yeah.
So that would be fine, but really only for that.
we're gonna have to stop soon, but we'll do this one and
Let's keep going.
Yeah, we can.
Actually, the next one goes. Number 4, add grade 712. Number 5, add grade 712. We're in agreement.
Yep.
Number 6. We are in agreement with number 6, but we also want to remove the word credit and replace it with unit, because we're talking about 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. They don't have credits with units.
I agree.
Yeah. So that one's okay. Mr. Stringer, were you okay on that?
Yeah, I just,
Okay. Number 7, this is an ad. Student participation in the credit recovery program shall be approved by a school-based panel consisting of, at a minimum, the principal, the teacher of record for the subject area for which the student must take the credit, the student school counselor, and the director of guidance or another administrator. The only change we would like is remove the director of guidance and use other designated administrators.
Just give me a second to read it again. Why would somebody have to decide that there's no criteria to,
This is an agreement with the NTA, NECSD, and administrative team that before putting a child in credit recovery, there would be some conversation about it. This is so before the student takes part in it, this panel needs to sit down and talk about, why, and let's make sure it's a successful opportunity for the child.
but no one is excluded. Everyone would have this conversation.
The principal, the teacher of record, yes, nobody excluded, but we want to take out director of guidance and just say other administrator. I'm sorry, Mr. Strider.
we have a director of guidance.
No, we want to take it out because we don't.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, we don't have
Did
a
I-
director of guidance.
Who is in charge of the guidance counselors?
The building principals.
Okay,
So why shouldn't it say, well, it says the principal there already.
yeah,
I just
Okay.
want to take guidance out,
okay,
director of guidance. That's all I'm asking, because we don't have one.
I agree with you.
It's fine. That was a pretty easy one.
Woo, that was a long one.
Okay. Number 8. The credit recovery options for high school students grades 9-12. Again, it's just making it more clear. Number 2, for number 9, ESYP, taking out including senior. We are in agreement with what's being recommended for 8 and 9 by the NTA and NES.
Okay,
Yes. Now, we were running really good there. There we go. Number 10, where there's a request to take out digital learning through a blended model of online coursework. That the senior administration cannot agree with. We do not support that. If you look, the UFT approved their contract and they have digital learning built into their work now. They're supporting it. I think, there are times when digital learning is needed for our students. For example, the medically fragile student that Dr. Campbell mentioned. Sometimes students are having a difficult time and they need a little break from the traditional classroom environment. We don't want them to stop their learning, So allowing us the opportunity to be flexible in the delivery models we have is the right thing to do for our kids. By just telling us you can't do digital learning, which is an online study, I feel is a disservice to the students. Dr. Campbell, do you want to comment?
I agree, because it gives students opportunities for extended learning opportunities. Why would we take options away for our students? When we're thinking about the entire district, we need to think about every student and every learner. And doing this limits the opportunity to get them across academy field, which is why we say we're here for every student, every goal back to get them across academy field. So how could we take opportunities away from them and platforms when this is the 21st century?
Good things. Digital learning for me is fine for medically fragile. If we can put the medically fragile back in for that group, that's fine, because they can't get to the school. They may be homebound, they may be in a hospital, who knows? But they should be able to learn. The concern I have is back from 2019, the board banned.
Oh, are you okay?
Is that-
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
We're almost there.
Medically
Almost
fragile is
there.
fine.
We're almost there.
Back in 2019, the board actually banned digital learning in the form that it was, which was Apex, which was a teacher facilitator, not an actual teacher of the course. So you had a room full of students on laptops taking 5, 6, 7 different subjects with a teacher helping them to log on and, quote, learning. Is that what's happening now? Is the program that's in place with a teacher facilitator? Or are kids in an English class sitting on a laptop learning from an English teacher?
There is a teacher effect, but I want to go back a little bit to what you said, and I, apologize for everyone's time, that we make the adjustment for medically fragile. What about the students who did have a circumstance where they could not attend because of a medical situation? And now, in order to catch them up, we have to use these types of platforms. So I think we need to be a little bit more open in terms of deciding who we utilize it for, because there are all sorts of interruption in education. We have students who transition in and out based on their circumstances. I want us to really think about our district and who we serve. We cannot compare ourselves to other districts in this county or above, because
This digital learning, how long of a time frames are you accruing a 10-week course?
So I think it depends on what the course is, and that's something that we could really talk about as the administration, as the educational experts, right? We can look at what the courses are, but to make a blanket statement that we should get rid of it is unfair to kids.
Because we had this and it was a disaster. It was used in a way that basically just pushed kids through.
Yep.
There was no learning. The kids were going across academy field, but they learned nothing because they were sitting there for pushing the button until the answer became correct.
So is it your recommendation that we look at programs closely and make sure that it is aligned, that we have not only a teacher of record, but there is a program of study that's aligned to New York State requirements for graduation and coursework?
I think it needs to be, if they're taking a digital learning
Mhm.
for English, or if it's social studies, that teacher has to be there for weeks with the student. They're using a computer,
Correct.
but they're learning with other students at the same time. That's not what we have now.
So, Madam Chair, is it possible that before we just dissolve this, that we take the feedback that we just heard and come up with a delivery model for what credit recovery, credit accrual would look like in a virtual or digital model?
I would like
Let
to
us-
say something first,
Sure.
okay? We had the district attorney come to us for this kind of a program. And that district attorney found that we were in violation on multiple levels. They could not criminally charge anyone because everyone was guilty with this program. And I remember it very well. And so the recommendations that were brought to us as a district on how, if we insisted on doing something similar, the monitoring we had to have, the record keeping, do we have that?
Yes.
So kids who are taking science classes, for example, and need lab time, somebody's tracking that.
I will show you the guidelines that we have created as a result of the recommendations that came from them.
Because previously, this digital learning did not align with the state standards.
Nobody's
and we
saying that it doesn't need to be improved. What we're saying is please don't do.
Because then we're back to my whole point of being here as a retiree, right? I could be having an umbrella drink somewhere, is that our kids have to learn. They have to learn. So if this can be aligned to everybody else and they're given a fair shot at the learning.
Give us an opportunity to come back and review the guidebook with you
Okay.
so that you see what the model is. Please give us a chance to do that before we
I
dissolve.
would ask before a question. The current system that you're gonna have in place for summer school, is there a teacher facilitator? Or is a teacher of that specific subject for that digital learning?
I want to defer to Dr. Sparrow.
You're not using any digital learning for summer school.
Well, there's a posting here though that came out. It came out to run from the end of July. It's a 2.5-week program for ELA teachers, for math teachers. Again, if it's for those two subjects, it normally in a year would be 123 hours of instruction. This was the posting that was put out that I pulled. That would mean in 12 hours, they could take the course. Did they learn?
Let us research that posting, please.
Mary, see?
Yes, if I can have it back.
We'll get back to you.
Right now, the way it is, I'm fine with putting this up for taking this out, but you can get whatever information that you have for the board. Let the board see this, talk about it the next meeting, and we don't have to bring this policy back the next meeting. Is that correct?
There's time on this.
This
right?
time. So I would like to move ahead with taking this out, but still getting all that information from you.
So why wouldn't we just hold until until we have?
Because I'd like the board to have a discussion about this in public.
If you
So
want
let's,
to,
so let's hold it, and then if we decide, you just.
Well, if we hold this, then the board can talk about it.
so you would want to put this up for a first read?
Put it up for a first read, because the board can always change this.
Okay.
Correct.
That way we can have a public discussion.
First read with the request to remove.
Yes, but,
Like we're doing with the other one.
Sure, I'm clear.
and then we have public
The
can
other
speak
one.
about it. It's on the agenda, and then that's it.
Thank you.
So we clarify.
After the meeting.
I can clarify.
All right,
Go ahead.
5411, want to wrap up?
Maybe not.
Oh,
5411,
yes.
there's one request on policy 5411.
Oh, we're gonna keep going?
Yeah.
We only have this, we have one recommendation.
Okay.
So,
Oh,
Madam Chair is recommending that we add something to the eligibility policy for interscholastic athletics and fine and performing arts, the high school drama and musical. That item. I was doing so good. Here we go. That item is beginning with,
wait, we're trying to find. hold
yep,
on.
yep, come down.
Down.
No, no, up, I mean. I believe it fell right under, come down a little bit. Stop right there. Any student wishing to participate. We have a request from the chair, beginning with the 23-24 school year. In order to be eligible for participation during the school year 23-24, correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Goulet, a student may not have an average of less than 65% in more than one subject. So I believe when we spoke, you said at the end of the first marking period, students that are actively involved in fine and performing arts or musicals or a sporting team could have no more than one grade at 65 or lower on their report card.
Correct. And they would know at the 5-week mark, there's another policy where teachers must input all those grades. I don't remember the name of it, but it requires that the teachers have all the grades up to date in 5-week intervals. So there would be opportunity for, you know, discussion along the way.
Mr. Stritter?
So 65 is passing. So wouldn't that be lower than 65? Because if you have all your classes are 65, then you wouldn't qualify.
Less than 65.
So it says less than 65?
Of less than 65.
Oh,
Not have
you
an
had said
average.
65 or
I'm
less.
sorry. I read it wrong. A student may not have an average of less than 65% in more than one subject.
Is that at what point in the year?
I would have to defer to Madam Chair, but I thought she told me it was at the end of the marking period when the data would be read.
So we would do the first report at the end of that first marking period and then for every 5-week intervals.
So the marking period is every 5 weeks.
10.
No, 10.
It's a progress report in the middle.
In the middle, there's a
So-
progress report.
Classes begin in September. You're waiting until the end of October?
The middle of October.
Talk about it. You want to do it in 5 weeks? What are you thinking? Mr. Lamar, what are you thinking?
The purpose of this, and tell me if I'm wrong, is to be able to let the students know how important academics are.
Right.
If you're waiting 10 weeks for the report card to come out, how does that help the student get his grades up?
Well, we can do it, and if we did it at the end of the first 5 weeks, when those grades are in, right? Then you're right. He or she would have the opportunity then to increase those grades before the end of the quarter. It's a continual process. It's a continual process of monitoring, intervening, helping, improving.
In order to do that, the district has to have a system in place to help the students.
I know that we just revised the policy. I believe that's why Ms. Hodges is here, because we revised this policy maybe 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
To include those types of, benchmarks. So I'm not sure what policy recommendation this is from, because we did have everything that you're asking for, Mr. Stridian. Those types of things are in the policy that we created.
The interventions are in,
The new 2023.
I thought that the change was
Appeal.
about attendance.
Yeah,
Appeal.
that was about attendance. That was not about grades.
And
This is about academics.
it was attendance, but also giving students an opportunity to appeal.
The previous policy, the policy we're talking about, really kept an annual expectation of achievement. We expected students to earn 4.5 credits by the end of the year in order to be eligible to participate in the next year. And we felt that that was a fair bar, because they really need 5.5 credits in order to graduate in 4 years. But whether a student takes 4 years, 5 years, or 6 years, as long as they graduate, that's our priority.
So
So
go ahead.
we also said that if we tell a student at the end of June, you only have 3.5 credits, you need 1 more credit if you want to participate in fall sports, we have the summer for them to take those courses to make that up. So the previous expectation was based on a 4.5 credit that helps us to make sure they stay on track for graduation. What I hear is Lay requesting is an academic achievement measure that would go throughout the year instead of waiting till the end of the year. That's what I see as the change.
Right, that is correct. And also that, if there's 9 periods in a day and you only have to earn 4.5, that means that you can fail 3 classes, depending on if they're half year or full. I don't understand why that's okay.
Like having 3 drinks. It's like having 3 drinks. You don't know if you're drunk or not.
I mean, this is all about academics. It's gonna affect extracurriculars. If we want to, as a district, say academics are important, I think that if you do every 5 weeks, as far as monitoring the grades, what is it, just a progress report?
Right.
how many assessments or how many are you getting in 5 weeks?
There's a policy that teachers are required to give so many,
And they have
so
to
many
input that
tests. Yeah.
in immediately. So after 3 weeks or 4 weeks, you're really gonna know if that student is below 65. So
Yeah.
there should be a system in place where after, like, say, the 3rd week of the marking period, if the student is failing, something has to happen on a district level. The teacher needs to work with somebody at the district level and say, this student needs extra.
This would work with the principal. Yeah.
They're in the building with them.
Right.
I mean, the coach is gonna know? Is the coach gonna know?
So at the 5 week mark, what happens to the athlete if he's below a 65? Because as right, so right now, we don't have that in place academically.
Mhm.
So,
According to this policy, they don't play. The revised one,
so I want to know that.
but I want it at the 3rd week, the coach and the teacher and guidance counselor sits with that student and says, hey, you got 2 weeks. Let's help you and do this.
I think-
Traditional,
Okay,
sorry.
I was just gonna say, I just know from my perspective, the coaches drove me crazy. It was like every other day, where are they at now? Where are they at now? Can I help them with this?
But
And the coaches
They
would
should be
help.
able to see.
All that data.
And they
that's
can now
accessible to
see.
Infinite Campus, correct?
Coaches be teaching.
Infinite Campus, all that data is accessible, correct?
Can I just give a
We
historical?
currently, I'm sorry, Mr. Hodge. We currently have a data report that we can run for eligibility based on this current policy. I can tell you right now who's eligible based on academics, based on this policy, and who's eligible based on attendance, based on this policy. As you change policies, we have to recreate additional reports that would have to generate the expectations you're creating.
Knowing that, I would like to see something along the lines of every 5 weeks is the threshold for when a decision is made. And every 3rd week, a report gets run that the coaches can see. And the coaches can then reach out to the teacher and say, what does he need to do? I mean, why?
For anything.
For any, I'm saying
Yeah.
coaches, but I mean, it can be the
music,
drama, all of it. We're talking about all of it.
Because
And where
So I'm talking.
where would be the threshold for them to be like, per se, ineligible? At a 5 week mark or at a report card?
Oh, that's a good question. You could just use the 5 as the flag and the report card as the cutoff, as termination.
I mean,
I don't know, we need to discuss that.
10 weeks is a long time to let things go. I think 5 weeks is a good point, but the 3rd week of the semester, there should be that report and intervention to make sure that when the 5th week comes, that kid's passing.
So can I just give you what traditionally most schools in the United States follow? So as far as academic policy, they go on a quarter base for eligibility. At the 5 week mark, most schools, and we can't bring up private schools. They don't run by standards. So in a public school, New York State, for example, at the 5 week mark, most schools give an interim report. Most schools in New York State Public High School Athletic Association follow that model. So at the 5 week mark, a progress report is handed to the coach. The coach then would hopefully do some type of intervention with the student. They would work with the coach, the parent, whatever. After that point, then the grade for eligibility is based on the quarter grade. So at the interim mark, we should be able to tell student B that this is where you stand right now. Now, at the end of that quarter, if that student does not meet your academic eligibility, they would be ineligible for the next semester. So they could be, like, for example, a football player that we start in August, let's just say make it to the sectionals, we're in November, the report card comes out. If they fail that threshold, they are no longer eligible until the 5 week mark. At the 5 week mark, now that's where you use the interim report to gain your eligibility back in the next semester, in the next quarter.
That explains it.
That's fair.
So quarterly is fine, but I would still like at the 3rd week, some kind of intervention.
I mean, that's,
I want
that could be possible. with the
intervention after
coaches.
intervention because What are we here for unless we're helping the kids
Sooner the better.
learn?
Give them the resources too.
Give them the resources, exactly.
Out of respect.
I'd rather give them, I'm sorry,
You can't just be a flag
Because I
that
was really
leads to
doing
nothing.
intervention. It's two different-
All right, out of respect for time, it's 6:30.
Okay.
I think this is a good opportunity for us to stop. We heard some really good feedback. I would like to put this on hold until the next policy meeting.
can we bring it to the full board just to talk about? That way the public can also talk about it?
Yeah.
Because if we don't put it on the agenda, then they
I
have
don't think we have anything to talk about. You're asking us to explore things. I think that Mr. Hodge needs time. The worst thing you can do is create a policy you can't manage and you can't implement,
We haven't
right?
created it yet.
I
We're sending it to
understand
the
that.
board with proposed changes, but there's no timeline to have that second reading.
I just don't want to go to the full board with the possibility of something that after it's agreed upon, I can't enforce because I don't have the data to be able to implement it, or I don't have the resources to implement it.
Okay, I
I
understand
just,
your point of view.
that's
I just would
just
like to
don't wanna
be able
go
to
back
have
to where we
everybody
were.
discuss it, so we can hear everyone's
Yeah, I
opinion,
agree.
because we're just great. I would like to hear
I
nothing.
agree.
all right. I'm okay as long
Well,
as,
as long as we don't,
okay.
we're not gonna approve it at the next meeting. It's not gonna happen. It's just, I want it up for discussion so the public can speak
And the board can
and the
speak.
board can
You
speak.
can
And
put it
then,
up for discussion without putting it on for a first reading.
that's fine, let's do that.
Yeah, let's do that.
So that, as long as it's on the agenda, so everyone can see it, they can see it on the agenda and read it.
And I'm sorry.
With all due respect to the whole data thing, I actually went to Infinite Campus's website. It's just a spreadsheet. You guys can pull up any of that data whenever you want.
Of course we can.
So it's not, there's nothing difficult. So I don't know what the barrier to getting the data would be.
There are no barriers to getting the data. In order to write the program to get the report takes time. It's not just flipping a switch. It's writing the.
You can filter, right?
You can filter, but you have to find out what the rules are that you want to filter and make sure that they're consistent. It's not just flipping a switch. It's a much more complicated system than that. Ad hoc reports, it's a different system.
People to a Fortune 500 company, you know how that works.
I remember the old days with my two kids, they would have the old pieces of paper that they'd have to sit down and.
Are we good? Are we done?
We're done. So we didn't do two, we'll carry over.
We're gonna put them on the agenda.
We are?
For discussion.
Now work on your other topic.
All right. Great.
I
Thank you.
didn't forget you.
Before everybody leave, I need everybody that showed up today at the work session to be at the next board meeting, right? Show up. Show up.